Hi guys. We are going to, I am going to go over a couple things that I noticed. I had quite a few people that turned in their assignments and they're not exactly where they need to be, in my opinion, as far as being complete or being done in a quality that I am looking for. Remember, your grade in this class is an effort grade. It is meaning that I am expecting you to put in your best effort when you're creating and completing these assignments. So um, some of you are going to be able to see if you've already turned in an assignment. You're going to be able to see that I put some notes in the assignment and I marked it incomplete. A few of you did a really nice job, and you'll see those notes as well. So if you have an incomplete or if you have not yet turned in your assignment, you are going to spend the class today working on improving with the notes that I have put in. And if you have not gotten notes or you did not turn anything in, you're going to listen, we're all going to listen to this video and make the improvements that I'm going to suggest. Okay. So nice place, but it still needs some work. So you notice up here in the corner, they've started adding a little bit of value in their negative space. I'm going to encourage that you think about how you could play that out. So in this instance, I think what they were going to go for was they were going to go for adding a little bit of value into the background, creating almost like a vignette where the, oops, how do I go? Chrome underneath there. Like the outside edge of the page is going to be just a little bit of color to it, and then it's going to come in toward the center and get a little lighter. Like it's almost got like a light halo around those buildings. Okay. So thinking about how you can address your background. If you make a mistake, I just made a little mistake, not a big deal. But if you make a mistake, you can grab your kneaded eraser, and again, just touch the kneaded eraser onto the page and it will pull up some of that color and help if you need to smooth something out. Okay, so then I could come back in and touch that up as well. So even though this paper here is looking like it's almost finished, it's still not, because we need to address the negative space, the space around our image. So maybe a small bit of a value change around here could add that in. Maybe the whole thing needs to be a very light value change. That is something that you can think about as you're going about your image and looking at what is going to make a good final composition. Okay. Now, while this composition is looking much better now that I've addressed the negative space, it is still not complete because it needs color glazing. Everyone is going to be putting in some color glazing into their work to add a pop of color. The direction was you don't have to use lots of different colors. You don't have to color everything, but you do need to put in some color glazing. In my opinion, one of these shapes right here in the front would be the best place to really draw my eye and create some emphasis and some contrast. This shape in and of itself is really an interesting shape, so it's drawing attention as it is. So maybe I'll add my color glazing to this shape right here to create a little bit more added interest. Remember, when you're color glazing, you are going to just use the same pressure the entire time, thinking about a little bit of contrast, then maybe thinking about unity and thinking about creating balance. Those are all of those principles of design we learned in our last assignment, but you can think about those and how those would play into your final design. So this is now looking a lot more like a completed final composition. I don't have a bunch of empty, dead white space around, and I've added in my value. But let's look at a few other examples, because I think I think some things are getting forgotten a little bit. So let's look at this example. So this person has kind of shied away a little bit from the change in the value. They were a little afraid of contrast. There's not a whole lot of really dark darks or really light lights. So I've already started to a little bit touch up some of that so you can see. But in that same idea, we want to be able to see the difference between these shapes. So in that idea, we want to come and bump up the value between the shapes that we see. So we have a little bit more value. Now back in here, this is probably going to be really, really dark back in this little crevice back here. This is the side of this shape. It's probably going to be really dark because it's underneath other things. So it's okay to pump up that value a little bit more. The other thing that has happened is if you look right here, the top of this shape and the side of this shape have kind of run together. They're all one thing because the line has disappeared. We don't want to draw a line. We don't want to come back in and draw a line, but we do want to come back in with a little bit of value. So we're going to come in with just a little bit of value, not a line, but a little bit of value. And we're going to make sure that we can see the contrast between one side and the other. This is why it is really important to have a variety of value on every single object that you are making. So every single object should have a light, a medium, and a dark on it. So if I'm on this side of this little piece right here, I'm going to darken it up just a little bit back by the back edge, just so it has some contrast. And then I'm going to lighten it up as it comes away from that side. So now it has a little bit of contrast, has a little bit of value. This will also have probably a little bit of a cast shadow underneath it, which will add a little bit of contrast and a little bit of value as well. So we can see that that stands apart, okay? So the problem with this overall assignment, or this overall project, is that the person struggled a little bit with the darks and the light value changes in each of their shapes. So when shapes start to become all running together, maybe like this example here, it is important that you give a little bit of a value change so that you can see where those shapes change from shapes to form, where you can see the difference between one side and the other. Okay, value changes in each of the sections going from light to dark, but then also making sure that it doesn't all become just a big pile of oatmeal and everything runs together. Okay, another thing that I have noticed is that some students are struggling a little bit with coloring in two directions. Remember, you don't need to just go in one direction. So we can go this way with our value, but then there's a second direction I can go back to the vanishing point. I can make my value go in that other direction. When you change directions and you go both directions that you have to shade, you smooth the value out and make it look a whole lot neater and even, okay? So if you go both directions, so if I shade this way, and then I also shade this way, I'm going to smooth out that value and give that nice, crisp, even edge, okay? I've also been seeing quite a few furry shapes. This is high school drawing. We should be staying inside the lines. So we should not see furry lines or things outside of those lines. You need to correct that if I'm seeing furry lines, okay? Okay, the second thing I've noticed, I'm seeing quite a bit of this going on. These bold outlines. Remember, we are not drawing outlines. So if you have an outline, you can fix it. It's not like it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean that you're totally done for, but it does mean that you need to go back in and do a little bit of work, which is why you're going to have that time today to do that. So you're going to go back in and think about where those lines are and add some value changes. So if I have some of these really dark lines like this right here, I'm going to think about going right up next to it and then just making the line kind of blend a little bit more into the background. So instead of being a line, now I've made it a little darker but it goes back into the piece. Same thing here. I can make this piece right here, get a little bit darker, just right where the line is. And then it gets lighter as it goes back, but it makes that line disappear. Same thing up here. I can come right up here next to the line and just pull and blend that line in so that it does not look like a line anymore. It now blends together. What happens if something like this happens, where this is a lighter section and you have a darker line? You can do one of two things. You can still blend that line by just taking just a little bit lighter touch, just a little bit lighter touch. It doesn't mean you are taking away from what you've done with the lighting. You're just going to kind of smooth out that corner. The second thing you can do is, again, touch just a little bit with your kneaded eraser first, just to take down if it's really dark, especially if it's really dark. And then you can come right next to it and you're just going to blend it in. It's a lighter touch, but it's still just adding just a touch of value, so that we have a value change instead of a bold line. If you have a really much darker areas, you could come in here and darken up a little bit more than that. So like this area right here actually should be a lot darker than this area, so they stand apart. So then that line that was showing up, I can then come in and adjust this back and get rid of all of those lines around that section, because I can make that get quite a bit darker. But then we have this section over here that's got that bold dark line, and it's supposed to stay lighter. So we just kind of touch it up just a little bit. You just barely touch right next to it, and you just extend out that value so that we do not have that line anymore. Okay, we don't want to see the lines. I want you to adjust the value so we don't see the line. Here, the bottom half of this, I probably could think about a cast shadow for this other section right here. Just a smidge of a shadow coming off of that piece, so that those two now separate from each other. And by doing that, that would get rid of that outline that I have right there. Okay, so if you have bold, dark outlines, you still need to come in and address them. I should not be seeing dark outlines. That's one of our major rules of shading. Okay, once again, I'm going to remind you, shade in both directions. So go toward the vanishing point if that's one of the directions you have to shade, and then shade either horizontal or vertical if that's the other direction you have to shade. If both of your directions go to a vanishing point, that is also fine. But just thinking about shading in both directions as you're shading is going to help create a smoother value change, and it's going to help with those furry edges from each other. And by doing that, that would get rid of that outline that I have right there. Okay, so if you have bold, dark outlines, you still need to come in and address them. I should not be seeing dark outlines. That's one of our major rules of shading. Okay, once again, I'm going to remind you, shade in both directions. So go toward the vanishing point if that's one of the directions you have to shade, and then shade either horizontal or vertical if that's the other direction you have to shade. If both of your directions go to a vanishing point, that is also fine. But just thinking about shading in both directions as you're shading is going to help create a smoother value change, and it's going to help with those furry edges. They've done color glazing, but this one is also going to need its background addressed. So one thing you can do for a background is you could think about maybe making a horizon line. So maybe if I took my pencil and I just drew a horizon line right through here like this, okay, maybe the bottom half of my paper, maybe down here, where I've got some cast shadows that are actually, these things are actually sitting on the ground down here, then maybe this is just a light coating over my background from that horizon line down. Maybe I just do a little light shading. This does two things. One, it ties your composition together. Two, it will remove any of those fingerprints or markings. Maybe you had to erase a little bit. It will just make those go away and you will not see them anymore. So that is a nice thing about coming back in with a little bit of value. And again, if you make a mistake, you can always erase with your kneaded eraser. Okay. Now, I drew a horizon line, but that does not mean that I want the top to stay white. Once again, look at all these smudges and smears in there. That's messy. But what I could do is then make above the horizon line just a skosh bigger. I mean, not bigger, darker. Okay, so maybe up here, it's just a little bit darker than where my horizon line meets. And I could kind of show that by darkening it up right there where that horizon line meets. Do you have to draw a horizon line? No, but you do have to address your negative space. So I did tell you 1/3 of your piece or 1/4 of your piece is negative space, but that doesn't mean that it is not going to have anything at all in it. It means that you are going to address it. It might not have a shape in it, but you're still going to address it as a part of your composition, your overall composition. And that means it might need a little bit of shading. It's going to need some cast shadows. You might want to adjust it with a horizon line instead of just coloring it all in one solid color. Okay, so thinking about what you are going to do for your background to make that pop out, okay? And now that I've done that, that probably means I need to come back in with another bit of color glazing and maybe touch up one more up here to balance this, because this probably needs just a smidge of balancing up here at the top compared to where that bottom red box is. So they kind of float with each other. Do you have to use the same color? No, you could use multiple colors if you wanted to. I think that's actually just a smidge of a different color red than that bottom color anyway, so that's not a big deal. Okay, so then you're addressing your negative space with your cast shadows and with your background. Okay, so let's look at a couple more examples. Here's another example where they're on the right track, but they have these really dark, bold outlines. So again, they're going to come in and maybe address that this is a cast shadow that will come down here and help alleviate a little bit of that. They're going to address their background. So they're going to think about, do they want to put just a light shading into the background? Okay. They're going to address their contrast. So some of these areas where things are kind of looking like they are running together, they're going to come back in with a bit of a darker value and bump that up just a little bit. Okay. And the other thing that this one I'm noticing is that this person, whoever this person is, they did not color in the correct directionality. So there should not be any random diagonal shading. We should be shading in the directions of the lines we've already drawn on our shapes. So you can go with the perspective or the lines that go to the vanishing point or the horizon lines, but you cannot just go in random diagonal means, okay? Okay, so a lot of you need to address a lot of things in your work. I have given notes in Student View. I have gone through and given some notes so you can see what it is you are missing or that you need to adjust. I'm pretty certain that almost every single person, I think there was like 2 people maybe, almost every single person needs to address this negative space back behind their art. You need to address how you are shading. It should not all be one color. It should not all look like a big pile of oatmeal on your page. Okay, and there needs to be color glazing. Color glazing you need to have at least one of your shapes with some color glazing to add some emphasis and some interest. Okay, so today I'm going to give you time to work. If you did not finish your pencil, not your pencil, your pen drawing assignment, you can also work on that today. And then these are due, okay, to spend some more time and work on these and improve them. Go back in, see what you need to correct. What do you need to do to make this better? Do you have bold outlines? Do you need to adjust your value? Is everything starting to become one color? So do you need to come back in and pull back out a little bit with your kneaded eraser and get some of that light value back into your pieces? You can still come back in and take value out. Okay, so if you got it too dark, you can still come back in and take value out. So don't panic if yours got too dark already. The kneaded eraser is your friend, and you can come back in and tap that in and get some of that pulled back out as well. Okay, and then this example, this person would need to come back in with a smidge of value and color in that negative space. So we can see that that is a little lighter, but it's not going to be that stark white background. Okay. All right. Good luck.